Welcome to another episode of Creating Magic. I'm Dani.
And I'm Paula.
And today we are talking all about Ahsoka. So we have our lovely friend East Coast Russell with us.
Hello.
And creator of our intro music, Jordan.
Hey, what's up, everyone?
So Jordan is back after the last episode he was with The Mandalorian, so it's only appropriate. Actually, Jordan requested to be on for this one.
Yeah.
I'm always down to talk Star Wars. Anytime, anywhere, anyplace.
So before we dive in, because you're 45 minutes off of watching the finale,
Yeah,
Paula binged the whole series yesterday.
Yeah, wow. What a commitment. 6 hours or something like that?
And I was so lost. Yes.
Okay.
So let's start a little with each person's background going into this. Because for me, I had watched some of the cartoons and I watched season 4 of Rebels because that's what I was told I was needed because I didn't have time to. The cartoons are a little hard for me sometimes because
you didn't have an entire lifetime of it being inundated with Star Wars to get into this show.
I mean, I have a lot. My issue is there's certain types of animation styles that I just can't get behind sometimes, and the Clone Wars ones is a struggle for me because I just don't enjoy the artwork as much. So it's a little more of a slog for me to get them through because I don't enjoy it as much as some other styles of animation.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and then I guess so. For me, you said, Paula, you said you binged the whole entire season.
Yes, it is.
Danny,
and I have no cartoon background at all.
Okay, so you haven't watched Clone Wars, Rebels,
nothing.
Okay.
Nothing.
Danny, I know you know the original trilogy and the prequels and just kind of the main and the sequel trilogy, right? Like the main.
I know all the movies.
Yeah.
I know all the live action TV shows. I have watched Bad Batch.
Okay.
I'm still going through Clone Wars, and I've done season 4 of Rebels. I haven't watched the rest of all the seasons of Rebels yet.
So fairly.
So I knew the characters going in.
Okay.
I at least had that.
Okay.
For me, I'm only original trilogy, Mandalorian, and this. That's it.
Yo, not even the prequels?
Not even the prequels. No.
That's wild. Okay. That's awesome. I'm so So some of the Star Wars fan community, and maybe Russell can back me up on this, some of the Star Wars fan community can be very gatekeepy.
Yeah, it's very true.
And so I think my favorite Star Wars discussions I've ever had, and my favorite type of Star Wars fan or whatever you want, person to person Star Wars, is the one that's Star Wars is this magical world that was created by this one man. That I think the best type of Star Wars is one that inspires somebody regardless of where you're entering the story at. And I just literally am coming off of this discussion with my friends of Star Wars is traditionally from the start. Star Wars has started with George Lucas, dropped you in the middle of the story without explaining anything. And so Paula, you not knowing a whole lot and then dropping into this show is almost very Star Wars. It's how most of us got introduced into it, is dropping us in the middle of some part of this huge saga and not explaining anything, and then you having to catch up and get context. So
yeah, I mean, I was texting Danny. I was like, "What is this?"
I'm sure my favorite text that has no consequence to the show at all. The first message I received in all caps. I also need to know what these chicken cat things are called.
Loath cats.
Oh, right. Right. Yeah, because there's all the creatures and aliens and stuff. Yeah, Russell's he's rubbing his eyes okay, how are we gonna dive?
I can't get past chicken cats now.
Okay.
It looked like a cat. Really, it had chicken feet.
It does.
Things.
You're right. That is a perfect way of describing them.
So Danny, you are fairly informed. Paula, you are doing the Star Wars traditional way and just dropping in no information. And then Russell, where are you coming from? Because I know you've been on a Star Wars episode before. I listened to a part of it, but I need to know how far does Star Wars go for you?
It's all of the above. I have seen all of the shows, watched all of the movies. I have read all of the Timothy Zahn Star Wars books around Thrawn.
Okay, wow. Yeah, I just got into the first one, but I have not finished it.
Yeah. So there's a ton of stuff just about Thrawn, like before he joins the Empire. There's like a whole bunch of books that go into his backstory and stuff that is kind of entertaining. And then a bunch of the other books that dive into all of these other characters and the stuff that happens in between all of these stories.
Got it. Okay, so between Russell and I, because for me, my cousin introduced me to Star Wars when I was 5 years old. And so it's the rest is history. Like I just couldn't get enough. My butt was in the seat for all the prequels in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. I read the Timothy Zahn Heir to the Empire trilogy, the Darth Bane novel. Like I've read the novels, I've played Knights of the Old Republic. Like I've done most of it. There's so much that there's just really no way that you can get to all of it unless you just devote your life to it, which again,
it happens. I own lightsabers now.
Yeah, right. So there's different levels. I think it's like Harry. I imagine, Danny, it's like Harry Potter that way. There's like different levels because people sometimes, I've only seen the movies and I haven't read the books, or I've only like read the books and maybe seen a couple movies and played Hogwarts Legacy or whatever. Like there's different levels you can enter it. And so between Russell and I, we can handle questions, but like
you guys are like the deep end, and Paula and I are for the beginners.
I love that. Well, I love the balance.
Like super beginner.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's super important. Like, honestly, my first question, knowing exactly where everyone is for Paula. Did you have fun?
Yeah.
I enjoyed it because if not, first of all, I would have fallen asleep if I hated it. And I didn't. So,
sure.
I enjoyed it. I was just confused about like who everybody was.
Yeah.
I knew Ahsoka because I saw her in Mandalorian, but I didn't really have like anything else. Like one of the questions I asked Danny, I was like Ezra was giving me, he's everybody's boo thing. Like I was like, he's giving me these vibes, like everybody's in love with this guy. Like,
who does he belong to?
I was like, who does he belong to? Like, and then Danny was like, oh no, like that she mentioned Jason Hera's dad, son, and I was like, at first I was like, is this like his dad? But then I was like, no, because they said that the name was Quran, and I was like, okay, I can't. I need a family tree, like.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Yeah, that was, I think.
Sorry, I did enjoy it. I liked it.
I feel like Rebels would be a good you and Lennon show, and maybe even Jude.
Okay.
So.
Yeah,
I watched Mandalorian with Jude. Now Lennon's watching it, so.
Yeah, Rebels is very much geared for kids. But Russell, you let me know if this resonates with you. Star Wars is made for the children and also the child in all of us.
For sure. Yeah. And I think it also, especially within the last, I'm going to say 10 years, has gotten much better at being for kids, but still able to deliver some more deeply emotional messaging.
Sure.
When I think about the Star Wars that we grew up with, it's a lot of action with, some very kind of simple messaging that goes along with it, which was very common at the time. But the way that these shows have been written, especially in the last decade, have really grown with the way that audiences have grown to just be a lot more emotionally impactful.
Yeah. Yeah.
I agree. I feel like some of it, I feel like kids will get bored with some things. Like no kid really wants to watch Boba Fett. It's just the pacing is not kid friendly.
That series was made specifically for 40.
It was not Paula friendly either. I tried.
You only watched the episode with Pedro, didn't you?
I didn't even get to that episode.
Oh, those are good episodes. Those are good
very entertaining episodes.
I was like,
especially as someone who at least occasionally goes to Disney, the Pedro Pascal, like you don't even have to watch the episodes around it. The Pedro Pascal episode as the Mandalorian in the Book of Boba Fett will make you smile the whole time.
Yeah,
Because
and
it is,
Okay.
it can work as a standalone. You won't be super confused.
yeah.
Okay.
It's not connected to the frustratingly, it's not connected to the show.
Right.
Just dropped in.
Yeah, it's like they needed an extra episode, and Dave was like, "All right,
I need to get Grogu back. So
yeah." For
Right.
he's like, I don't want to waste the time in the Mandalorian to do it, so I could just drop it in here.
It's very much deemed by the fandom as those two episodes are like Mando season 2.5.
Yeah.
Right.
But in the context of this show, Ahsoka, that's fascinating, Paula, as it's serving as the Ahsoka. Okay, so off the bat, the Ahsoka episode in season 2 of the Mandalorian, the Jedi, where she's in that like burned out forest planet and she's fighting Morgan Elsbeth, and she has like the Beskar spear and all that stuff. It's very samurai. It's very Akira Kurosawa, and it's maybe my favorite episode of any Mandalorian season. Because it is Dave Filoni, who, for those who don't know listening, Dave Filoni is largely considered by the Star Wars fandom to be the heir apparent to Lucasfilm, who should be making anything creative decisions in Lucasfilm, especially in my opinion, after this season. But he studied under George Lucas making the Clone Wars animated series. So all the Clone Wars stuff and all the Rebel stuff, that's him. That's Dave Filoni. So for 10 years plus, he worked with George Lucas to develop the Clone Wars and kind of bridge the gap between Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, and Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. So the Clone Wars, the 3-year conflict of the Clone Wars. In that, he created the character of Ahsoka as an animated character, as the apprentice of Anakin Skywalker, that all that happened off screen. She's not even mentioned in Revenge of the Sith, but he created this character with George Lucas. So it's got sort of the maker, George Lucas, capital M, the maker's blessing of this character that Dave created. He's gone on to take that character into post Return of the Jedi, post original trilogy timeline stuff. And so she shows up in The Mandalorian. And I remember watching that episode a couple of years ago and just losing my mind, because I wasn't even the biggest fan of Ahsoka as a character in the Clone Wars or Rebels, to be quite honest. But seeing her in live action and seeing what she represented as Dave's understanding that Jedi are merely just space samurai with magic powers. And that is important because George Lucas was partially inspired by Akira Kurosawa's Hidden Fortress and Akira Kurosawa old samurai films. He patterned the Jedi, Obi-Wan Kenobi originally in the original Star Wars, to be this wandering Ronin samurai sort of swordsman, space swordsman with a laser sword. And that's essentially Ahsoka is continuing that tradition. And that's my favorite part of Star Wars, is this mystical sort of weird force stuff. There's like, sort of quasi Buddhism philosophy of devoiding yourself of attachment. I loved all of it. And that's why I really, really enjoyed this series.
Russell, as the other major Star Wars fan, how did you feel about the season as a whole?
The season as a whole, to be honest, kind of bothered me. To be super clear, the work that was done bringing these animated characters, the lot of them, into live action, the way that was accomplished was genuinely a triumph. Like visually, just incredible. And I'm not just talking about Ahsoka, but Hera, Jason, like the Thrawn, all of these characters, coming to live action, they all looked incredible. The presence from each one of the characters on screen was super great. The structure of the show itself, having had time to reflect on it, just really wasn't great in my opinion. I think if you look at like the first half of the season, it's a little on the slower side. There are a ton of points where multiple characters are just sort of sitting with their arms crossed or staring into middle distance or just kind of like existing on screen when other stuff could have been happening. And then we get the last 2 episodes where so much information was just thrown at us in like really, really casual ways. There is a single line that completely alters the way that the construction of this planet Peridia, as like we come to understand it. And it's like an offhanded thing from Ezra, where he says Thrawn woke up the Night Sisters. Like that should have been its own scene. And honestly, that probably should have been its own scene in the very first episode. For like how that kind of thing came to be, because it's like this really kind of casual tossed aside thing that is very clearly going to mean something later on, as we see the show ending with they are at Dathomir with what I'm pretty sure is a cargo hold full
sister homeworld.
Yeah. So there is a lot. Like, we are definitely not done seeing Night Sisters doing weird stuff with green fire. That's totally going to be a thing that we see more of in the not too distant future.
And for me, bring it on. I love that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And in a way that ties to even more kind of tangentially related Star Wars stuff, because up until this point in the story, as far as anyone is aware, there is a single Night Sister still alive, and her name is Marin, and she is part of the Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order and Star Wars Jedi Survivor video games. And she's a major character in Jedi Survivor and kind of a minor character in Fallen Order. But like a big part of her character is I think I'm the last of my kind. And she makes a lot of decisions that she otherwise would not make because she thinks she's the last of her kind. And I'm like, it has pretty significant consequences for that character for that to not be true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I will agree with Russell on this, that Star Wars very much traditionally is at the same time incredible as far as like the imaginative mythology that is injected into it, and also it's got pacing problems. It always has. All of these shows, they're front loaded with a lot of information and a lot of character development in the front end, and then in the back end they don't have a lot of like the plot, like they don't move the plot along as much, and then the last 2 episodes like have to catch up.
Yeah, I feel like this show could have gone either of these 2 directions, and I would have been really happy. It either could have been a 2+ hour movie that they just released all at once, where they cut out some of the stuff where people are just sort of having conversations that don't really matter, or it could have been 10 episodes where they kind of filled out some of this stuff a little more, including like the very small conversation that Hu Yang and Ezra have about why Sabine and Ahsoka were having so many problems. That was like 3 whole episodes of the show, where these 2 very clearly have some issue to work out, and it just doesn't get discussed until Hu Yang says 1 sentence about it in the last episode. And that's kind of a bummer. I feel like that, like, either with more time or less time, that could have been a more impactful thing.
And it's just like they like try to, at times it feels like sometimes like what you were saying is like plot holes were trying to be filled, and they're filled by 1 sentence that's thrown in.
Right.
Versus actually like I would have loved to actually like known about why Ahsoka and Sabine have so many issues from Ahsoka and Sabine, not my David Tennant droid.
Mm-hmm. So let me make a comment on that, because I think, Russell, what we're seeing is Filoni wrote all of these episodes, to my understanding.
Right.
And directed 2 of them. Filoni is dyed-in-the-wool as an animation director that usually has at least 12 episodes a season.
Yep.
Half-an-hour episodes, but 12 episodes a season to flesh out characters and make an arc for the season. For the most part, for like Bad Batch and Clone Wars and stuff, we're talking about 16, 20 episodes a season, right?
Yep.
Like lots of episodes. I think what we're seeing is his limitations of trying to make big big budget Star Wars television and also tell a story in a constrained 8 episodes.
I think that's right. And I, that line, short though it was, really causes you to look at Sabine's arc in this season very, very differently all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm.
Because, initially it's like, man, she just cannot get out of her own way and keeps causing these problems. And like, what is going on with this character that we all love so much? And then you get that one line and you're like, cool. Sabine's entire arc in this show is
Mandalore. She talks about the purge, right? The Night of 1,000 Tears.
The purge of Mandalore, but it's also it's trust.
Yeah.
Her entire arc can be summed up in that single word. She has she does not trust herself. She does not trust other people around her. She cannot stand in that first episode that she is treated like some kind of hero because she feels like a persistent failure. She has to trust in the Force. She has to trust her master. She has to trust that somebody else is going to be in control every once in a while and it's going to work out. And when you get that line, it's helpful for all of that stuff to kind of fall into place, and you're like, oh, okay, I get it. But I feel like you lose some of that watching it from week to week versus kind of binging it all at once.
Mm.
When you don't have that context, even somewhere in the middle, I feel like would have helped a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But if you go back and watch it with that line in mind, what a cool arc. Like the way that was written, once you have that information, is great. Because very clearly her, really struggling to trust anything other than, like whatever instinct is going through her head at the time, until she finally like has that breaking moment. And I guess really more for Paula's edification than anyone else's here. There is a scene in Star Wars Rebels where she has a lightsaber and Kanan Jarrus, Ezra's master, is trying to figure out how to teach her to be a Jedi. And one of the things that he says is that she's never going to figure out how to use the Force until she can figure out how to get past this block that she has in her own mind. There is something stopping her from doing this thing. Mm-hmm. And so it was cool to see, like, that's what that was in that moment. Was her figuring out how to trust something other than herself, and that kind of released that block. So for fans of Rebels, that was like a 6 or 7 year long like thing that came to fruition in that scene, which was incredibly cool to see. But it, without that little tiny bit of extra explanation, it's not quite as impactful for folks who didn't, who haven't seen other stuff.
And that's
she was just like angsty, like,
right. Yeah.
Like, I was like, because I don't know anything. So
right.
Yeah. And Paula, I think that's been the main question for this show for me is I know I'm going to have a fun time. I know I'm going to love it. And also, part of me wants them to go harder into the lore because part of me is like they won't do it. They won't go super sweaty. They won't go super sweaty Star Wars nerd. And Filoni's kind of going sweaty. He's kind of going in. He's going in. But on the other side of that is this part of my brain that is not a Star Wars fan and is just like or it's not a dyed in the wool Star Wars fan. It's a casual Star Wars fan, and it's going, I wonder how this plays to people like Paula, the general audience. So again, fascinating to yeah. So angsty. So she's angsty.
Yeah, I was like, what's her deal? It was like kind of like almost like a moody teenager. Yeah. Like, you're like, what's your problem?
No, I mean,
you want to talk?
If you go to watch Rebels in particular, she's been through so much. She was forced into an imperial education system where she basically designed a super weapon that was specifically built to kill Mandalorians, like kill her own people. And she didn't really understand what it was until it happened, and then she sabotaged it and got away, but like parts of it still worked. So like she had this tremendous amount of guilt, and then what is called the Night of 1,000 Tears where all of Mandalore just gets completely wiped out. When the Empire falls, like she's got all of this emotional weight on her. And yeah, if you haven't watched that stuff, like all of that is lost on the first couple of episodes where she just kind of can't get out of her own way. At the same time, Ezra Bridger in Rebels is just this really silly kid. And they did such a good job bringing parts of that comedy forward. I mean, Iman Esfandi did such an incredible job being like a goofball, but at the same time, like kind of centered and grown up, and a lot of that stuff, the like, you know, or we could talk, or like, you know, what if you arrested us instead? Like that is straight out of the goofy kid from Rebels, who kind of grew up in a war zone, and you know, laughing through stuff like that was how he dealt with things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very true to the character. He did great. I mean, 2 seconds on screen, and I'm like, damn, that's Ezra. That's crazy.
He was such a perfect choice for that.
Like,
how did you feel about like the casting across the board, and not just him?
There is not a character that I saw that I was unhappy with.
Me neither.
And I know that there are like for Thrawn, there may have been other characters who were more physically similar to the like stuff that has been seen on screen. But he has been the voice of Thrawn for a very long time, not just in Rebels, but also in almost all of the audiobooks.
Yeah.
Where it's been his. So like in my head, he has always been Thrawn. And the moment he started speaking, I was like, yep, I'm in. Like, but you know, outside of that, like the makeup was great. The stuff they did with the eyes was like spot on, because in the books in particular, his race, the Chiss, are always described their eyes as being almost glowing. And like they captured that really, really well in this live action adaptation. I can't think of anyone on screen that we saw that I don't think was a great pick for that role in one way or another.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. From the jump in that Mandalorian season 2 episode, Ahsoka, Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka felt somehow like a grown-up Ahsoka. And then Ezra, I think Ezra's maybe the strongest casting, wildly, because he has the least amount of screen time out of all the characters, but like, and maybe that's because we haven't spent a lot of time with him, but he's great. Thrawn's great. Sabine's great. Hera's great. Mary Elizabeth Winstead is Hera.
What a cool thing for Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who is married to Ewan McGregor.
Yeah, she's married to Obi-Wan Kenobi.
To have this, like in real life, the two of them are married, and now the two of them will forever be Star Wars royalty. Because a funny thing, and I'm again saying this mostly for Paula, Hera is one of the most badass pilots in all of like Star Wars lore, and as a general for the rebellion, once Rebels is over and she becomes like a full-on general, is really like from the books like one of the big reasons that the rebellion makes it. Like her tactical planning and stuff like that, like she is like fully on point. She's been in a ton of the games as like the tip of the spear. So you know, like bringing
I very much see them bringing her in to whatever we go forward in with Ahsoka or the other Filoni stuff as the anti-Thrawn. Like she's going to have to match Thrawn's wit militarily.
Yeah, she's definitely going to continue to play a part, and I'm like, she's done such a great job, and I'm sure that her husband really enjoys watching her in those pants.
Let's talk about another family connection. Lars Mikkelsen as Thrawn, his brother Mads Mikkelsen as the man who invented the Death Star laser in Rogue One. Mads Mikkelsen, yeah.
Also
Galen
Grindelwald in the Fantastic
I know who that is.
Universe.
Yeah.
Looks like Potter. Got it.
Yeah, there's a Potter connection, and his brother is Thrawn. So there's another, just keeping it in the family. But what is nepotism, honestly? In Hollywood. No, but anyway, very cool. very expertly cast. I agree with Russell.
Ashley Eckstein didn't get a cameo or anything in this, did she?
No, she didn't, but
She did not get a cameo in this. We also didn't see Zeb.
Didn't see Zeb.
He was at the very end of the Mandalorian, most recent Mandalorian season in the bar. Paula, he's the like big like cat looking thing in the background in at the end of Mandalorian. He was a big part of Star Wars Rebels, and I can't escape the notion that like somebody at some point is gonna like fill him in on all of the stuff that has just happened. And
he was part of the Rebels crew.
Yeah, he's like he is very much like Ezra's family, just like the rest of these characters that we have seen so far. And I was genuinely surprised that he was not on that ship at the very end. Waiting for Ezra to come off of that shuttle.
Yeah, me too.
And then we have, if anyone knows me and my love of Star Wars, there's one thing I love about Star Wars. And Chopper belongs in that category.
Chopper, the war criminal.
I love all droids. I don't have any
highest
shame.
death count of any droid on screen. And I mean genuinely death count.
Paula, have you heard about this about Chopper? Have you seen Stina's pin? It's like Chopper, I kill things.
Yes.
He has destroyed entire ships full of stormtroopers. He has pushed people off of ledges. Like Chopper is legit a war criminal, and it's hilarious because everyone absolutely adores him for it.
Yeah, he's like if R2-D2 was just a grizzled war criminal,
just extremely violent.
Yeah,
because he had to be.
He's on my cosplay list.
I mean, yeah, get some cardboard cylinders and.
I have plans. My Ahsoka's almost done, but now I'm like, now I want the Gandalf Ahsoka, as Russell and Katie called it.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, so I have the friends that watched Rebels with me, or that watched Ahsoka with me tonight. One of the friends didn't realize the Ahsoka Gandalf connection, so they had again been into Star Wars for a long time.
Paula hasn't watched Lord of the Rings yet either, so she doesn't know this.
Okay, well, so Gandalf is a wizard in Lord
I know who Gandalf is. I do know that.
We're working on it.
Okay, Gandalf is a wizard in Lord of the Rings, and the big... I don't want to spoil anything. Never mind that you told me that information. But there's a lot of parallels from Ahsoka to Gandalf, and that goes back way before this series because Dave Filoni on Instagram, if you follow him, has always posted little drawings of like Gandalf and Ahsoka and the parallels there. And so
very clearly a man who does not pay attention during meetings.
Yeah, he's always doodling. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But that connection has proven very poignant in this series because Ahsoka very much had a similar trajectory and arc as Gandalf did in the Lord of the Rings films and books. And when I pointed that out to my friend, it kind of blew his mind. It kind of also spoiled what was going to happen with her arc, but like in the best way. He was like, "Oh,
yep,
hey."
It's very, very good. We got two not Jedi, whose status for the moment is to be determined. One for incredibly sad reasons, and the other for just because we have no idea what's going to happen. With Baylan Skoll and Shin Hati.
Yeah. I agreed, Russell. If there's anything I can count on for Star Wars is if there's a morally ambiguous, interesting character in Star Wars, they're not going to last long in the story. And then also in real world life, Ray Stevenson, the actor that plays Baylan Skoll, the white bearded guy, passed away sadly earlier this year. So
like weeks before the show started airing.
Yeah, very recently.
Yeah. But yeah, and it turned out he was, genuinely one of the best actors on screen. Just he had very few lines, and every time he spoke, he just crushed the scenes that he was in. And not
only crushed the scenes that he was in, Russell, but like was espousing philosophy that, again, like I said at the beginning of this this recording, is stuff that my philosophy professor friend and I talk about, and that's all my friends, my Star Wars friends, talk about when we get into these deep philosophical discussions about how the Jedi of the prequel era were flawed, and Balin's character very much points out he likes the idea of the Jedi Order, but he doesn't actually like what it became, especially in the context of the Clone Wars and the prequels.
Yeah.
Paula, do you want to share what your opinions of Lord Balin were?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Well, I did look it up last because I was like, oh, who is this guy? Like, I was like, this guy's hot. Like,
yeah. No, I mean,
I was like, wow.
Yeah, Daddy Balin.
Yeah,
Daddy.
I was like,
yeah. I saw some thirst on the internet for Balin.
Yeah. That was me last night. I was like, holy hell.
Yeah, he's a handsome guy.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible job acting. And I mean, I could probably spend an entire other podcast episode talking about that last scene and have it mean very little to most people.
Yeah, so this was the other thing. I agree, Russell. The last like 3 minutes of the episode of the finale with him on the ridge, and there's like kind of Argonath, again, Lord of the Rings reference, but like big like stone statues of things that he's perched on, and he's looking in the distance at some temple type thing. That's what I mean when I talked earlier about like Filoni going into the sweaty like nerd stuff, into the deep lore, because like I lost my mind.
Yeah, all of that meant a lot to like 150 people.
Yeah. Yeah. So that gives me pause. Makes me simultaneously really excited for season 2 or like a movie or whatever we're gonna get next. Yeah. And then also like, all right, well, but I wonder what the reaction to this season of television is going to be, because it might have Disney rein in Filoni and be like, all right, too far into the lore. I don't know. I would assume it's a delicate balance, and I'm glad that I don't have to make those decisions in a boardroom. You know,
since we've gotten here, I don't want to, because I know we could go forever on this subject. What do you want to see come next out of the series, or are there characters you want to see more of, or that we haven't met yet, or met in the live action yet?
I definitely want to see Zeb involved in some way, just because we've already seen him on screen, and now that Ezra is back in the correct galaxy, the two of them need to interact with one another as adults, because that's going to be deeply entertaining for me. I really want some kind of connection between Marin and these new Night Sisters. And they've got to do something with Thrawn before before the sequel series starts. So like there's actually not a ton of time between, like, in this universe, between where they are now and where Rey pops up in the first of the sequel movies. Like they've got a little bit of time to play around here, but not like a ton.
And they've also got a lot of characters that they have to explain. They don't have to, but they should explain where they were during these events.
Yeah.
Mainly very big characters that would have to be de-aged and CGI'd.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, it's great that Sabine and Ahsoka are in an entire other galaxy, because if they stay over there for a while, then they can come back when the new Jedi Order is formed, which is the thing that we know happens when Rey's arc is finished. But yeah, I suspect that that's not what's going to happen. So it'll be really interesting to see how this plays out. And what we know so far is that a lot of the stuff that is going to happen in these TV shows for The Mandalorian and for Ahsoka and for at least one other show that has not started yet are building towards a movie that Dave Filoni is hoping will act as like an Avengers style, pull all of these stories together into this like really epic thing. And it's very specifically Avenger style because Dave Filoni is working very, very closely with his longtime friend who built the Avengers series. So he has an enormous amount of experience in doing exactly this kind of, like world building, stitching everything together into this, kind of larger narrative. So that, there's going to be a lot happening, likely over the next like 5 years. Building towards that.
It's always interesting to me that people like know like all this stuff.
Yeah, it's a problem. I have a problem. The first step is admitting that you have a problem. Yeah.
So this was actually spelled out at the last D23, where they came out on stage and they showed us Chopper and they were like, "This is the thing that we're doing," and then this huge timeline showed up on the screen behind them, and they were like, "This is the world that we're trying to build right now," and they went way back.
The timeline.
Yeah, they went way back into the timeline to show the High Republic books. Which go like way, way back in time. And if you are a fan of reading Star Wars books, they are very well done. And then, the other end of the timeline where they were like, we're doing this stuff too. And they're building towards all of this new stuff. So that's where they kind of broke down a lot of that information. But yeah, they took over like 25 minutes of D23 earlier, or it was either late last year or early this year.
It was last March was D23.
Yeah, where they just broke down like how all of this was going to go.
Yeah, I think it's impressive that you can like, oh, this is from this, and because like I went into Mandalorian blindly, not knowing anything. I went in. I tell everybody for the wrong reasons. I was like, well, I'm going to watch this. So I watched it, and then when I saw Luke Skywalker, I was so confused because I was like, wait a second, I know who this guy is. So I was like, but what? And then I think I had asked Dani, I was like, when did this happen? Because like he was young, right? So like at first I was like, oh, I didn't even think that it was like around the same like time. So I was like, I need like a timeline because I don't know. I was so confused.
This is a very funny thing as like an artifact of what I do for work every day. That I have this piece of useless information in my head every single time, and I mean it, every single time a new Star Wars thing comes out, whatever that Star Wars thing is, the most searched question is, when did this happen?
Yeah.
And I mean, it's every time. They're just like, okay, like where in this mess of Star Wars stuff is this even happening? Because so it is not. You are so far from being alone in that confusion.
Yeah. Well, and again, I go back to it's almost tradition.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Because imagine that you are somewhere between 8 years old and we'll say 18 years old in 1977, the summer of 1977. And you go and see this movie that just there's faceless guys in white armor. There's a guy dressed in all black armor with the samurai helmet. There's a princess with space buns. There's two robots. There's an old man talking to a young kid that's a moisture farmer. What is moisture farming? He talks to him about the Clone Wars. What are the Clone Wars? And so you just sort of like are dropped into this adventure, and you have to kind of keep picking up context clues as you go along. But it doesn't matter because the adventure of it, the intrigue, the stuff you've never seen before. There's like ships flying through asteroid fields and like, people moving things with their minds and people with lasers. Like crazy stuff is happening. And so, as is the Star Wars tradition, I think that they just don't. They're not like the MCU where they have to like meticulously.
Where there's 100 years of comics that have, they
don't have any source material. Yeah, they're just kind of making it up.
If you have never watched it, Paula, there is a mini documentary on Disney Plus called Light and Magic, and it is about the history of the way that the Lucas production house basically like came to be.
visual effects.
It is one of my very favorite things to point to anytime someone is kind of gatekeepy about Star Wars, or they're like, these are hard and fast rules about Star Wars, because the first 2 episodes of that are nothing but line after line after line of how flying by the seat of their pants this entire operation for the first Star Wars movie was, and how they were doing stuff that had never been done before, but they didn't even know how to do it. So like they would go into a room and Lucas would be like, cool, we want this to happen. And they go, that doesn't exist. Like that thing you're asking for. And he was like, all right, figure it out. And he would just walk away. Like so much of that first movie, especially, is just, this is what we could get away with at the time with the extremely limited budget we had.
A bunch of sweaty dudes in a California warehouse building models and cameras.
Thank goodness we made friends with Jim Henson at the same time and made a deal.
I know, right?
So I mean, it is such an amazing thing to see, just like this thing that is now this like massive universe with all of these, like stories tying into one another, genuinely started with a couple of guys in a garage who were looking at George Lucas going, I don't think this thing you're talking about exists. And he goes, yeah, all right, figure it out, and walks away.
And now they're all multimillionaires.
Right. Yeah.
Because they made the thing that didn't exist.
They made the thing.
They invented
They sat down and went, all right, well, how would we do this?
They invented an entire visual effects industry to create Star Wars.
And then did it again for several other movies.
Multiple other movies. Yeah. Indiana Jones, E.T., all the Spielberg stuff. Yeah.
There is a really spectacular line in Light and Magic where Steven Spielberg is interviewed, and he said, George Lucas showed me an early version of this movie with a bunch of other directors, and we're all sitting there, and none of us could understand a single thing that was happening on screen. And Steven Spielberg is like, this could be a good movie. You've got a lot of really great ideas here, but right now it's just chaos. Like it's just nonsense on the screen. And then he was like, and it turns out I was wrong, because it is now one of the most popular franchises ever with absolutely no explanation for things that are going on.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is baked into the DNA of this thing to be confused.
Yeah.
Good. Then I feel like one of you now.
Yeah.
You're one of us, to the point that in 2025 we'll all be in Japan for Star Wars Celebration. Paula, I will then take you over to Harry Potter stuff after Celebration.
Thank you.
Absolutely refuse to do that.
I was thinking about it. Well, I've always wanted to go to Japan anyway. But
if I'm going to go to Japan, I'm going to spend the entire time enjoying Japan. I really, really enjoyed the time that I went to Star Wars Celebration, but it is really important for people who have never been before to know that every single thing about Star Wars Celebration is a lottery system. So there is no guarantee that you get to see or do anything. And there are a lot of people who don't make it through the lottery for the entirety of the event that they have.
But you'll be in Japan.
And in which case I could just go to Japan at any time and just enjoy Japan, which is something I very much want to do. But I feel like those two things should be very, very separate things in my mind.
Yeah. I still want to go. I also want to do D23 next year, so.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, you're giving me pause on the Star Wars Celebration, because I've done no research other than I feel like I either need to do that or Galaxy's Edge, and Galaxy's Edge is probably going to be. I've never been.
Come on, do it! Come build a lightsaber.
Yeah, I feel like I at least need to do that as my pilgrimage.
We're not that far.
Yeah,
I'm 30 minutes. I'm 30 minutes away.
Yeah.
Amazing.
We'll meet you there.
Okay.
Lightsabers and all.
Amazing.
Does this mean that Ahsoka's going to need new lightsabers again?
No.
Okay. But I'm like, but I want the legacy sabers, so I have to wait now because she's going to get new sabers?
She still has the one, and Hu Yang still has all of her parts. So she can very easily rebuild the Shoto saber that she has using all of the bits that are there. And the hardest part of that, she's got a lot of time on her hands right now, so it's not going to be that hard, is that her Kyber crystal is currently underneath a mountain of shit that Thrawn blew up. But it is still there, so she could quite easily rebuild that saber.
Yeah, I have her ones from the cartoon series. So I have those ones, but I really want the new Legacy set.
Mhm.
So bad.
Her new design.
In the cartoon series, is she not an adult?
She's not.
She starts off as Anakin's Padawan, so she's quite young.
14.
Yeah, and you basically see her grow through Clone Wars, and then she is basically
that episode where they did like the flashback, that was like her age range in the cartoon.
The purgatory on the weird bridge
with
yeah, all of the different versions
with your girl from the Barbie movie. See, we're connecting to the things you love.
Oh my god, it's Sasha from the Barbie movie.
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, that episode, just in context of the entire series, that episode 5 that had brought back Hayden Christensen as Anakin, is also not in the context of Rebels, but in the context of all of Star Wars and Clone Wars, maybe some of the greatest Star Wars television we've ever gotten.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was, I mean, super, super well done, and is likely not going to be the last time that we see the glowy bridge, just based on the little bits from the ending of this show.
Yeah, maybe not the last time we'll see Hayden Christensen reprising his role as Anakin Skywalker. Which
I'm
is
positive.
I did message Danny last night, and I was like, "What is happening? What is this?" I did say something like, "Is this like purgatory?"
Kind of.
I was like,
that's kind of how they treated it, which I love.
Yeah, it just I don't know if she posted it today or we just didn't see it till today. Our friend Michaela, Magic by Michaela, did 90 seconds of what you need to know about Ahsoka, and it mentions it like very quickly. It's a great reel, like for anyone that really wants a very quick like.
She posted it 2 weeks ago. I needed it.
How did we not say it till today?
I don't know.
We both saw it
3 days ago. I was like, where was this? 3 days ago.
But it's like really funny. She also posted another one, and it was about being like a background Jedi. So
she's really good, yeah.
For some fun content, Magic by Michaela. But all right, well, let's wrap up. It's getting a little late. Not for Paula, but
not for me. I still have time.
I do want to say before we finish this off is that although we are talking about Ahsoka, the SAG strikes are still happening. So, and we do stand in support of the actors, the writers, everyone involved in the strikes. We have kind of avoided doing anything with new content and new shows and stuff outside of like, I think most of our stuff we've been covering events more so than movies or anything. So this is like the first episode we've really put out since the strike started, but we do stand in support of all those with SAG and SAG-AFTRA.
George Lucas is famously also anti-big, Hollywood.
Yep. And it is, if you are curious why it's going to be a really long time before we get a second season of this show or the movie that this is building up to, Disney being one of the major companies that was not playing ball with the actors, is a pretty big part of why that's going to happen.
Yeah, I didn't want to go through this episode and not mention that, just because we know they are back at the negotiating table, but we really haven't seen any movement on there as at this time of recording. So, but thank you guys for joining. I know we could go on for hours. I
know. I learned a lot.
Good. I almost, Paula, you saying that you're dropping in as a relative newbie. Again, it's in the tradition. And it's again, something my friends and I discussed right before we hopped on here, was that, Star Wars is sometimes at its best when you don't know anything and you're just dropping in and saying, well, that's cool. Well, I want to learn more about that. And Star Wars is so vast at this point now that you can learn more. Like there's resources out there to have more context, or if you just don't care to, I feel like if it's a good enough show to stand on its own, you'll enjoy it either way.
I really think the boys are at the right age to really enjoy the cartoon versions with you.
Yeah.
So.
And make no mistake.
I'm not anti-cartoon, so.
No, but I like knowing your kids. I feel like it's going to be something that they'll enjoy. Like, I know you watch cartoons, but just like knowing Lennon and Jude, I'm like, I think that they would actually really enjoy this one.
Yeah, it's great stuff, and it certainly gets better with time. The initial bits of Clone Wars are really kind of like very much like Saturday morning cartoony, but like it builds up to like larger, kind of storytelling arcs. But I think when you combine Clone Wars and Rebels, it's like 16 seasons and not small seasons, as Jordan pointed out earlier. So
That's why I haven't been able to finish it yet. It's a lot.
I have a list that I keep in Google Docs that is just the Clone Wars episodes that you can watch without all of the filler stuff in between.
Yeah.
And it makes it a lot easier to consume that show.
Yeah. Well, it's like any anime arc, right? It's like,
right.
It's all my friends that are super into One Piece, and then the Netflix series came out, and they're like, you got to watch One Piece. And I'm like, maybe when I retire someday.
Seriously. Yeah.
I can watch 1,000 episodes of anime. Anyway, but that's kind of like how Star Wars is. So that's why I like at the jump, and Russell was kind of nodding along with in agreement. Like, I don't like Star Wars fans that are gatekeepy, because again, in accordance with solidarity with actors and writers and stuff, and just fellow creatives, I know how hard it is to make stuff for people that people like. So I can't imagine the pressure on Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau and all the other people's, shoulders to make new Star Wars. That's a tall order. So the fact that I enjoyed this series, and I think that this series feels like classic George Lucas Star Wars to me, truly, and also feels like I'm especially sees episode 7, the one where they get to the new galaxy, and there's like all this Night Sister stuff and Peridia and wolves and little turtle alien creatures and stuff like that. That felt like I was reading an EU novel.
Yeah.
Like that felt like I was watching an expanded universe novel from the late 90s, early 2000s, when we didn't know we were going to get more Star Wars. Like that felt, for the first time maybe in a long time, maybe some of the Mandalorian episodes did, but this one's particularly, that felt like one of those mystical Jedi, like post Return of the Jedi, or like early, Old Republic novels, where there was like stuff I'd never seen before but felt like Star Wars. So, and that's been the series overall. It feels like Star Wars. There's some bumps and bruises, and again, like Russell pointed out, some like pacing issues, but for me overall, feels like Star Wars, and that's the most important part.
Absolutely.
I love Ahsoka.
Yeah, and Ahsoka as a character.
I'm pro Ahsoka, so.
Yeah, Ahsoka as a character, especially on her Gandalf, arc, is like, and Gandalf's one of my favorite characters.
I'm so glad that she is now such a universally beloved character, because when she was first introduced in Clone Wars, the Star Wars gatekeeper kids hated her, and all you could find was negativity about this character when she was first unveiled. And it makes me so happy to see that she is so universally beloved. If you go to any Star Wars cosplay thing, there are always a ton of folks. Every time Celebration happens, Ashley Eckstein gets around easily 200 Ahsoka cosplayers in various forms. And it's just such a delight to see like all of the joy that has come from this character, because
it's me.
Exactly.
It's in there.
Because it started with this, really kind of negative place. And I'm so glad that this is such a shining example of kind of beating the gatekeepers. And now we have this really incredible series that is going to build into something even cooler as a result of kind of ignoring those folks.
Right.
Same with Hayden Christensen and Anakin Skywalker.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And the prequels in general, just kind of like looping back
he's
around.
Getting the love he deserves.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Does anyone want to shout out where you can be found? You two aren't as active on the socials as Paula and I, but if there's anything you want to share or shout out, feel free.
Yeah, for me, you can follow me. I'm mostly on Instagram and Twitter, but Instagram is better for my mental health, and Twitter is slowly being run into the ground. And so on Instagram, I'm Specs and Things, SPECSANDTHINGS. And then I actually have, I do music. I did the music for this podcast, which they so graciously asked me to do a couple of years ago, and I had a lot of fun with it. I'm actually transitioning to a full-time musician and full-time sort of sound maker. And you can actually find my music project as well. My buddy and I have we're producing indie synth pop stuff. You can find us at Robbers on Instagram, Spotify, Apple Music. That's RAABERS, Robbers, for fans of the 1975 St. Lucia, Walk the Moon, The Killers, like all of that stuff, indie synth pop 80s fun stuff. And so that's mostly me singing, although we want to produce other people and have guest vocalists and instrumentalists and stuff like that too. But yeah, both of those.
Russ is good.
I'm not allowed on social media until I get a new job, so
Okay.
That's acceptable. Paula?
You can find me on Twitch, Instagram, TikTok, Threads as at Unconceivable. I'm also the host of Creating Magic. You can find me there as well.
I'm so proud of you. It's taken a while for her to claim that.
I always forget.
And you can find me at Mandrakes and Mischief on all the things, as well as at Creating Magic Podcast. And until next time, keep creating.
With another clever idea to get us killed, or worse, expelled.